This time we're going to make a penguin pot holder. So the idea is you're using insulated wadding inside here. So you slip your hand inside the pocket on the front and you can pick up hand handles. And if you've got two of them, maybe casserole dishes out of the oven. But you could also use this hanging up, maybe even in your sewing room or your kitchen, and keep your crafty bits and bobs in there as well. So it can either be a pot holder or it can be a pocket. Obviously, I'm not going to use insulated wadding. If it's a pocket, use something like a fusible craft fleece instead. But it's really simple and really quick to make. And we've done all of this without a pattern, mainly using circle templates and then cutting things by eye. So have a look at the description box below, and that'll give you the details of all of the ingredients that you need to make your little pot holder. Choose which fabrics you're going to use, and let's get sewing. Now I'm going to use, to make my circle shapes, the 7-inch acrylic template from my Nesting Circles templates, which I will simply pop over my fabric. This is going to be my backing fabric. Draw around the edge and cut out the shape. You can use rotary cutters with these as well. I would suggest a 28mm rotary cutter. If you don't have the circle templates, then just something, a side plate or something that's circular and around about 7 inches. It doesn't have to be exact. And draw around that. And then cut out the shape. And I will need one for my backing fabric, one from white fleece, I've used polar fleece, one from black fleece, I've used teddy fleece, one for the back of the pan holder, one for the front, and then two cut from heat resistant wadding. So the first thing we're going to do is to make up the face, and that uses 4 pieces. So my white fleece, my black fleece, my backing fabric, and oh, actually that's going to be my backing fabric, so you don't really see that one. You could use the same for all of them, it doesn't matter. I'm just using scraps that I had, and my my wadding. So let's make this part of the face first of all. So this is my penguin body, and I'll need to cut that, measure down about 2 inches from the top and cut straight across, and that makes a little pocket in the face that you're going to put your hand inside. So that's about 2 inches, and cut across there. And then we'll do the same with all of the other pieces, so you can now use that as a template if you wish. So obviously you've got bigger hands. If you use an 8-inch circle template instead of a 7, that will probably be better. Let's do the same with the wadding. Use as many layers as you need to of this wadding as well. This is going to go across the back of the hand, so one layer is going to be fine. And if you're using, whoops, I'll follow the manufacturer's instructions. So using the wadding on the bottom of the pan holder, you might want to make 2 layers there. Snip that off there. So there's my 4 pieces. So let's take the black, and we just want to make a white mark around the center here. So we'll now do the white bit, which creates the face. So we'll put the backing and wadding to one side for the moment. So that's going to sit over the top of the black, and we want to make like an M shape like this. So you can do all this in paper first, actually, if you're not too confident. So let's draw a line around here and down to a point in the middle, and that's going to form the beak. So imagine that double, that's going to be the shape of the face. So let's just cut around there. And then this sits just to the bottom of the body. So I can use a little bit of basting spray. I'll just take that away for a second, so I'm spraying away from my table, and place this over the top. If you've used a heat erasable pen for your markings, then like I've got a bit of ink there, I can just wipe that away with my iron. And let's sew around the edge of that face on my sewing machine. You could sew this by hand if you like a little bit of hand sewing. I'm just using a straight stitch, but a satin stitch, blanket stitch would look quite nice as well. But just for speed's sake, I'm just sewing around with my straight stitch on my sewing machine, down to the point and back up again. And then while I'm here with the sewing machine, I'm going to take my yellow felt or orange felt, whatever you have, and I'm just going to cut out a triangle. I think that's going to be too big. Oh no, I think that's fine. And we'll sew that over the top. So the sides of this are around 1 1/4 inches. So we'll place that just over the point of the black bit as it comes down. And again, sew around the edge. And let's just snip off any loose threads. So pop that back down again, and we're going to take our 2 buttons and just have a play with where we want them to go. I kind of like them just over the top of the beak. If you wanted to put, oh no, that's quite cute. Let's put them to one side like that. So you can have him cross-eyed, you can have him cute, you can have them at the top of his head, wherever you think they look good. And when you're happy with the position, it may be an idea, again, to just mark where they're going to go so that you know that they're evenly spaced on each side when you come to sew them. And I'm going to use some white embroidery thread, because I think white embroidery thread in the blacks of the eyes bring them to life a little bit. So I just want to make sure that when I sew these on, that my stitch is going straight across, and keep both eyes with the stitch the same way, so it's not looking a little bit wonky. That can be quite thick there. See, the white's just brought his eye to life a little bit. So let's knock this off at the back. And do the same with the other eye. So a little knot in the back. Through the button. Make sure the stitch is going across and back through. And knot it off. And then just to give him a little bit more warmth, I've got some cheap blusher, which you could either use a brush or your finger to just add a little bit of colour to the cheeks. That'll fade off eventually, but you can always add more later on. It just looks cute there. Then we'll need to put our insulator wadding on the back. So I'm going to have that with the reflective side facing down. Again, I'm just taking away for a second to spray basting spray. And that goes over the top. and then I'll spray the back of it, and I'm just using 505 basting spray for this. Use it for everything. And that then goes over the top of my backing piece. So I'm now going to sew all the way around the edge, really close to the edge. And the only reason for that is because I'm going to put binding around the edge of this, and it's getting quite chunky. So it keeps all the layers together, but it also flattens them a little bit as well. So I'll sew from the back actually, I can see what I'm doing better there. So pop needle down there and just sew. So this will all be covered up by binding. It's purely to hold all of the pieces together. And across the top. Now, if you need to trim anything back, then of course you can do at this stage. I'm just going to bring up my ironing board and take a length of bias binding, slightly longer for now. That's going to go across the top and fold that in half. I'm just using 3/4 inch bias binding. Doesn't need to be biased for this bit, but it will be when it goes around the edge of the whole thing. So that's folded in half again. Slip this over the top. So wrap it all the way around. And let's secure that with a few clips. So push the penguin's head as far up into the binding as it will go. So fold over and clip. I mean, a lot easier to use clips than pins, so do invest in some of these if you don't have any already. And then sew that in place. Then we'll take the backing pieces. So I've got one with the wadding. I'm going to do this facing down, so the reflective bit is going to be on the bottom. I don't think, to be honest, it really matters which way round they go. And again, if you wanted to use 2 pieces just to make it extra secure, then you can do. So let's place that over the top. Spray this one again. So again, I'm just taking it away from my sewing machine and my table so it doesn't mark. And let's have the stripes the same way up. That goes over there. And then this goes over the top. And again, I'm going to put a couple of clips in here. And then I'm going to sew again close to the edge to hold these pieces together. There's a broken clip there, like that. And then sew all the way around this section. Now I've made a little hanging loop by folding my bias binding in half. That's a 6-inch length of binding. Fold in half and press, and then sew down the long edge. And I've basically made a piece of ribbon now. And then fold this in half. The edges together like that would be nice. And this we're going to sew to the center top. You can measure and mark that by folding in half if you wish. I'm just doing it by eye. Facing inwards. And so. And then I've also got another strip of bias binding which is long enough to go all the way around, which again I've folded in half and pressed, just like we did across the top here. So I'm going to start just at the side and wrap my binding around there. If you need to trim any of this down to hold it in place, then you can do. You know, if you start to find that you've got some of the, like here, maybe some of that wadding is sticking out a little bit too much and your binding won't go around it. As long as you're keeping this in a circular shape, then you can trim that back down. So let's bend this over, clip all the way around, and when I get to the end, this will be a little bit too long, but that means I can overlap the ends and fold this end underneath to make it neat. So when I get to the end here, I'm going to snip that off, fold it over, and overlap the edge of my binding where I started. Try and keep that as neat as possible. And another clip in there. And then we'll sew all the way around. And then when you've come back to the beginning, I'm just going to fold that up and just sew, just to keep it in place facing upwards. So let's just trim off any loose threads that you might see. And there's my little pot holder finished. So there's my cute little penguin, finished off front and back. So you can slip your hand inside there and pick up pots, or you can just hang him up, maybe even in your sewing room, and keep some maybe crafty little bits and bobs in there instead and use it as a hanging pocket. So I hope you enjoy making these. I think they're so much fun. I love creating characters like these, and maybe watch out for some more. But I hope you enjoy the video, and I hope you enjoy making the little penguin pot holders, and I shall see you again soon.